Item 10C, adopt a resolution authorizing acceptance of a technical assistance grant from the Federal Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration for pipeline safety advocacy initiatives in the amount of $50,000 and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with the Pipeline Safety Coalition in the amount of $25,000 for grant administration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I just completed a lengthy presentation about numbers of initiatives that the city has individually undertaken as part of its response and actions directed at recovery in the wake of the 2010 explosion and fire in our community. The subject matter before you tonight, a technical assistance grant from PHMSA, the Federal Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, is another initiative that was actually begun after outreach from Mayor Ed Pawlowski of Allentown, Pennsylvania, shortly after a similarly devastating gas pipeline explosion occurred in that town, coincidentally, exactly 4 years ago today, on February 10th, 2011, just 6 months after the explosion here. Mayor Pawlowski proposed to Mayor Ruane the idea of an establishment of a bi-coastal mayor's organization to advocate, educate, and to otherwise facilitate legislative and other reform necessary to bring about a safer gas utility system, particularly in populated communities. A great idea. Mayor Ruane readily agreed, and the two mayors have coordinated on a somewhat limited basis over the last couple of years towards this objective. But a good idea without funding source is hard to get off the ground and hard to carry out much in the way of initiative or activity. The Mayor's Council on Pipeline Safety was fortunate to be able to coordinate with a grassroots not-for-profit organization in Pennsylvania called the Pipeline Safety Coalition, and its executive director, Linda Farrell, who is a tireless advocate on behalf of pipeline safety, advocacy, education, and reform. Through Linda's efforts, the Mayor's Council was able to identify the opportunity of funding through PHMSA grants. In 2009, PHMSA established a technical assistance grant program, funded it at approximately $1 million per year, and has in each year since 2009 awarded grants in an amount up to $50,000 each for education, advocacy, and other types of activities related to pipeline and other types of safety initiatives that would generally fall under their regulatory umbrella. Working with the Pipeline Safety Coalition, this city and the city of Allentown individually filed grant applications for the 2015 grant year, and each of us were awarded a grant. By city policy, any grants are required to be accepted formally by the city council and acknowledged in order for any grant funds to be paid out. The grant awarded to the city is in the maximum amount through the PHMSA program of $50,000, and it generally covers a work program that is focused around some of the issues that were identified as being relevant to or causal factors of the explosion here in 2010. The grant provides for a contract with the Pipeline Safety Coalition to actually do the staff work to coordinate with experts in the development of white papers and best practice recommendations on the topics that the grant identifies, and is intended the grant is intended to provide a self-sufficient, self-supporting program and operations, so that the grant-funded activities do not expect and they should not impact the regular city work program or city resources other than those that are provided directly through the grant. I did take an opportunity to look at the PHMSA website, and I would encourage interested members of the council to do that as well, to see a listing of the grants that have been made by PHMSA over the last 5-6 years since the program has been in place. And it's actually interesting that a very wide variety of programs and activities have been funded, and ours certainly stacks up well within the general outline of the types of issues that are being supported by the technical assistance grants. The action that's before you tonight is twofold. One, to authorize formal acceptance of the grant, and two, to authorize execution of a contract with the Pipeline Safety Coalition for services associated with carrying out the grant-funded program. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for City Manager? Ken?
I don't get it. I mean, I think it's a good idea and everything, but it's confusing to understand what the $25,000 is in relation to the $50,000.
So the $25,000 is essentially the legwork, staff work to support the development of the white papers and the technical evaluation that the grant-funded program envisions. So in order to avoid impacting the city's staff work program, the contract would provide for staff services to be provided by the grassroots not-for-profit Pipeline Safety Coalition that has connections and is operating themselves within this environment to produce the work program that the grant funds are intended to produce.
So it has its built-in funding source.
Correct.
For staff. So
Correct.
Of the $50,000, half of that is allocated for staff to
do the work.
To do the work. Okay.
Correct.
I also, if I could, Mr. Mayor, I just went on to the Mayor's Council on Pipeline Safety.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's great to, I mean, it's effective because it shows three fairly current within the last 5 years, San Bruno being the first one, major catastrophes on pipelines. And this is, I think, what I've mentioned, and I think what this council probably needs to do is to promote this, to get nearly, I mean, hopefully every community to at least be a part of this. Not just our mayor and the one in Allentown, but, every jurisdiction in between. So I'm hoping that's being, pursued.
Yes. So the idea behind the Mayor's Council is to promote at the highest levels of local elected leadership an awareness not only among mayors whose communities have been impacted by this type of disaster, and there have been, like you say, a few, particularly in populated areas, which seems to be something that's happened with a little bit too much frequency since the explosion here in San Bruno, but also to engage labor, interested citizens, and industry representatives as well for sort of a multifaceted membership led by elected mayors whose interests of representing citizens in real communities where these things have actually happened to put together a work program. So it's a little bit different than some of the other grassroots organizations that have organized around advocates, landowners whose property is being taken by big oil companies who are bringing, big pipelines through their rural areas. This has a little bit of a different kind of focus, and the idea is by engaging mayors and city council members that the real-time perspective of your constituents can be represented in a more tangible way. It's a nice website.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Through the
Michael?
chair, yeah, I think I was a little confused too, trying to get through the, there's a lot of acronyms in here, and it looks like there's a lot of things going on. So basically, PHMSA puts up a grant. The city of San Bruno applied for the grant. We're going to take that grant and give a portion of that to the Pipeline Safety Coalition to do work on behalf of the Mayor's Council on Pipeline Safety.
That is correct. That's very good. Thank
Okay.
you. Yes, it was. I tried hard to make it. It is complicated.
Okay.
And I would only point out that the Mayor's Council is really not yet even really a organized organization, so it doesn't really have the ability to do it itself unless Jim and I and Ed Pulowski were to actually do the work, and we're at capacity on work. So, so this is really an opportunity to put this initiative forward, get this organization on its feet, produce some tangible work product, and begin to develop possibly a more stable funding source. Certainly these TAG grants are likely to be available. Numbers of organizations have applied repeatedly, and so for at least a limited period of time, this is actually a good resource for the type of work program that is envisioned here.
Okay. And so beyond the amount that's outlined here for the staff support, the remaining amount remains with the city of San Bruno, and that'll be expended as directed by the Pipeline Safety Coalition?
Yeah, so the grant work program, as I said, calls for the development of best practice white papers. It also includes the budget. The $50,000 was allocated in the grant proposal for, there's some travel involved for Jim to meet with Ed and other mayors to further the interests of the Mayor's Council. There's, I believe, some intent to use some of the funds for expert consulting assistance to develop the best practice recommendations. So there's the $50,000 is spoken for to deliver the work program, 50% of it to do the legwork, the staff work.
Okay. And I guess what I was trying to get at is, I mean, so the money's all spent, but, or at least encumbered, but not necessarily spent. And
That's correct.
So does that money then sit with the city of San Bruno until it's used up?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. So it's granted to the city and then expended by the city, but for the work program that was outlined, it can't be used for anything else.
Okay, and that's kind of what I wanted to see. Is it protected from?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Any action by the council?
I'll introduce the resolution. Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra. Aye. Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.